This video is the fourth in a series covering my experience of the Precure franchise. I would suggest going back and watching the first three videos if you have the time. However, as the season covered in this video is disconnected from the previous three, that's not entirely necessary. The decision is yours. Also, blanket spoiler warning for the first four seasons of Precure. Yes, Precure 5, which from this point on I shall simply refer to as Yes 5, is the fourth season of Precure and thus far my favorite. The reason why is pretty simple. Part 1. A rock-solid cast. The first thing that stands out about this season of Precure, just by looking at any promotional material of it, is that it has an ensemble cast of 5 Precures, hence the season's title, unlike the previous seasons all having only 2 Precures. Having this large a cast works to the show's benefit, since it's able to have a somewhat complex web of relationships instead of simple straight lines. Since previous seasons had only 2 Precures, all they could do was focus on fleshing out the one relationship between those two characters, and no matter how interesting one relationship may be, stretching it out over 50 or 100 episodes proved to be impossible without adding in additional characters to spice things up. And when those additional characters end up being the best part of the show, they serve as proof that having just 2 characters isn't enough to sustain a long-running show like Precure. Thankfully, whoever's running the show at Toei seemed to have realized that moving into Precure's 4th season, because Yes 5 features a well-rounded cast of 5, each of whom has a unique design, personality, and relationship with one another. What makes the group dynamic of these 5 Precure so compelling is that despite outwardly seeming so different with all of them having different likes and aspirations, they're all able to unite and work toward a common goal with the same level of enthusiasm and respect for one another, whether that goal be decorating a shop or restoring a kingdom that was destroyed by an evil corporation. Indeed, this group dynamic only works because they're all so different. There's Rin, the super athletic florist who eventually finds her passion in making accessories after, of all things, making a tiara for a wedding. She ends up butting heads on a few occasions with Karen, the student council president, over things ranging from the color of flowers to work ethic, but they still manage to work through their differences and work well and fight well together. Karen comes with her own intrigues, first having to work through her insecurities about being the one person everyone brings their problems to before she can ever become a Precure. There's her best friend Komachi, who's often a good counsel to Karen, and also my most relatable character. Komachi's a budding novelist who starts out writing shit and throughout the season struggles to write slightly less shit. There's Utada, the young actress/idol singer who... more about her later, but she looks up to and is pulled into the whole Precure thing by the main girl, the one who pulls in the rest of the cast and unites them under one fun, reckless banner, Nozomi, the girl who, despite being clumsy, careless, and having no prior aspirations, strives forward with such determination that everyone else can't help but get swept along. I think it's safe to say that, with the possible exception of Utada, I was more interested in each of these characters individually than I was with any of the previous Precure. So let me take some time to look at each character individually. Rin is the most athletic of the group. So athletic, in fact, that every sports team in the school wants her to be on their team. On the one hand, being good at sports is a trait we've seen in the 2 main Precure before, and in many shows besides, so having an athletic character is nothing new. What makes it work here is that being athletic is not Rin's sole defining trait. Unlike the prior athletic Precure, of whose interests I could tell you little outside of their respective sports, Rin has clear interests and passions and responsibilities away from the sports field. She has siblings to look after, and she has to help run her family's flower shop. Each of these little aspects of her are explored in their own scenes and sometimes episodes, impressive given the size of the cast, and taken together, they help the viewer in forming an image of Rin as a rounded character. And each little trait that defines her character isn't something that's just there, they develop over the course of the show. Like, her siblings start off as little pissants, right? But after an episode with them, we see how her siblings really care about her despite all the grief they cause, and Rin's love grows stronger in return. Rin butts heads with Karen a few times about flowers, but once they have an episode together in Rin's flower shop, we're shown their individual knowledge and how they come to respect one another's viewpoints, with their own views growing as a result. Her desire to become a professional designer of accessories, if such an occupation even exists, isn't something that springs out of nowhere, but rather builds on a few past developments. One time, Rin helped to make some cute items for Knott's house, That's the store this season's cute animal friends who have human forms run, which led her to being scouted to design a tiara for a wedding, which in turn led her to realize that she likes doing that sort of thing, and wants to do more of it for a living. Because all of these elements of her character are fleshed out like this, not only does Reem seem like a rounded character, but a dynamic one who grows and becomes a better person over the course of the show thanks to her exposure to all the craziness around her, and that dynamic nature can be said of most of the rest of the cast. Karen, the student council president, completes her arc fairly quickly, but a few reprisals of her arc throughout the season and the influence she has upon Rin and Komachi helps keep her feeling fresh throughout the season. At the start of the series, as the student council president, the weight of all the responsibilities thrust onto her shoulders holds her to one mindset. She believes that she has to do all the work herself, that only she can produce the best possible results, so why rely on others? This mindset so overwhelms her that she's initially barred from becoming a Precure. She's the last to join the group, and where the other characters each got to become a Precure in the span of one episode, with episodes 1 through 4 each being about one of the other members joining, Karen fails to join at the end of episode 5. Given the pattern that the previous 4 episodes had set, that was an unexpected turn and made me quite curious about the next episode and how Karen's dilemma would be resolved. Of course, the next episode rolls around, and after learning the value of teamwork and friendship, learning that she doesn't have to shoulder all the burden on her own, Karen's able to become a Precure, and the team is assembled, and all is right with the world. At that point, despite being so early in the series, Karen's character does become somewhat static until the last core, but that doesn't mean she doesn't have interesting things to contribute. Karen's relationship with the other characters, specifically Rin, helps keep her interesting through the rest of the show. Rin and Karen hit it off as rivals fairly early on, and spark a competitive streak in one another. That's all well and good, but it's made better by the fact that their rivalry helps each of them to make informed decisions about their future. Late into the show, both of them realize that they've been living in the present and don't have a solid future goal to work toward, so they use their rivalry as an excuse to think about their future. Something like, the winner is whoever finds what they want to do first. And through that, they both find what they want to do. Rin an accessory designer, and Karen a doctor. Karen's choice of career isn't cool only because it makes sense for her. After all, she is someone who feels a strong desire to help those in need, and she's a damn hard worker. But it's also cool because she was motivated by her friendly rivalry with Rin to move forward with her life. In this way, becoming a Precure has helped Karen to develop into a better person, because without this ridiculous magical girl fighting nonsense, she never would have become friends with Rin and known she wanted to be a doctor. Worse still, she might have been stuck in her old mindset of having to do everything herself. Karen's friends made her a better person, and that is nothing if not cool to watch. Komachi is the character that I relate to the most. She's an aspiring novelist and spends a lot of time writing and being frustrated and writing some more. As a fellow shitty writer myself, everything about this girl's struggles hits home with me. From her introduction in episode 4, we get a solid idea of who she is and who she wants to be. Unlike Rin and Karen, she's got her shit figured out from the start, so she stays interesting by constantly working toward a goal instead of trying to find one. Her artist struggle is first put into the spotlight in episode 16, when one of the cute animal friends, Nuts, reads one of her stories and tells her it was shit, and I was like, yes! Let me explain. Being told that your writing is shit is something that needs to happen every writer, and the sooner the better. Anything you hear about someone being born a talented writer is a load of crap. Writing is a skill that one has to develop and hone, and getting good at writing requires a lot of hard work. By necessity, a writer has to work through writing shit in order to eventually become good, and they can only learn and grow from their terrible writing if they recognize that the writing is terrible to begin with. In the case of Komachi, episode 16 starts with her recounting her garbage story and her friends applauding her for it, telling her how great it was before Nuts drops the truth bomb. Komachi is hurt by this realization, and that hit home with me because it felt real. I know what it feels like to look on a piece of writing you were once proud of only to realize it's garbage, and Komachi spends the rest of the episode contemplating whether or not she should really be on this path, which is something I have wondered about myself a lot. To be fair to that episode, it's not entirely on point in its message. Nuts is kinda portrayed as the bad guy for dropping the truth bomb on Komachi, and her friends who mindlessly praise her shitty work while offering up no constructive criticism are the good guys because they're nice, and that's a load of nonsense. They're not the good guys in this scenario. In fact, they're actively hurting Komachi by deluding her into thinking that her shit writing is good and by not encouraging her to improve, and yet the episode seems content to push them as the good guys because they say nice things and Nuts doesn't. It all works out only because Nuts finds a gentler way to deliver his criticism, and Komachi realizes on her own that criticism is something she needs. It's bizarre when you think about it, that in a show about how cool friends are, that the friends were actually unwittingly hurting one of their own, and they never learned their lesson. But Komachi does, and that's what's important. Now, as for the third member to join the group, Utada, she's, well, you know what, I'll get back to her later, I promise. I promise. Later, I'll get back to her, I promise. But in the meantime, let's move on to the final member of the group, actually the first, and the main character, Nozomi. Nozomi is naive and idealistic, a tad clumsy, bad at school, and often in over her head. By her own admission, she's not good at anything and struggles over what she's going to do with her life. But when she finds a cause worth backing, something worth fighting for, you'll find no one more determined than her. There's something charming about her nigh unbreakable optimism. While she does seem similar to previous Precure leads Nagisa and Saki, what with her clumsiness and being bad at school and all, she stands above them as a more rounded and fun character for how much she grows by the end of the show and how almost over the top she is in her cheerfulness. Nozomi starts the series uncertain of her future, bemoaning the fact that she has no passions, nothing she's good at. When she becomes a Precure, though, and discovers she has the power to save an entire kingdom, an entire people, so overjoyed is she to have found a purpose that she wholly commits herself to that cause. Not only does she fill herself with determination, but she ropes in the other members of the group and is the key to holding them all together. It's safe to say that without Nozomi, the rest of Precure would fall apart. Nozomi is Arine's best friend, and they're inseparable. Utada is taken in by how upbeat and cool Nozomi can be, both in normal life and as a Precure. Komachi is charmed by Nozomi's cheerfulness, and seeing Nozomi's unrivaled determination helps Karen grow out of her lonely mindset. Through being her cheerful self, Nozomi brought together as friends a group of people who might otherwise have never spoken, and that action proves a message of this season, that if you approach the most impossible of tasks with the utmost determination and a smile, you can succeed. Nozomi is a fun character and a solid lead because of her fun, optimistic personality and her ability to keep her team together, even in the hardest of times. And that's not even all there is to her. She, like the rest of the cast, is not a static character. By the end of the series, she matures into a more responsible person. She starts off the series unsure of her future, not good at anything, especially school, but by the end of the series comes to the realization that, more than anything, she wants to be a teacher. Aside from the amusing irony of a bad student wanting to be a good teacher, this development both makes sense, given everything we've learned about her throughout the show, and provides a satisfying conclusion to her development. Nozomi has spent the entire season with the goal of helping others, namely the cute animal friends with their destroyed kingdom, but she also helps out anyone who needs help if she can. In one episode, Urada's manager goes AWOL, and Nozomi, without realizing it, ends up stepping in and doing his job for him, helping Utada get through her busy day, all because she wanted to help her friend. Given that helping people gives her so much joy, it's only natural that she'd want to pursue a career where she does nothing but, and what better career than one where she helps young people as they grow up. This provides a satisfying end for Nozomi's arc because it's heartwarming to see someone who's been grappling with their future find a purpose. And this purpose didn't come out of nowhere. It was built up to from everything Nozomi had experienced, from being there for her friends to helping aliens reclaim their kingdom. Nozomi is a fun, admirable character who grows, which makes her a solid protagonist in my book. But sadly, not all of the cast can be as cool as those four. Part 2, the not-so-okay cast members. I can only name 2 characters in the show that really rub me the wrong way. That might not sound like a lot in comparison to the other 4, or 6 if you count the first 2 cute animal friends, but considering the amount of screen time these 2 get, I feel justified in bringing up my ire against them. The first of these 2 characters is Utada. She is the youngest of the group, a freshman in middle school, and she starts out the series as an actress. Sure, the only role she's had are bit at best, but still, at the start of the series, she already has a career going, so that's weird. I don't know what kids are going to relate to that, or adults for that matter. Actually, yeah, by that merit, she is completely unrelatable. On top of that, it's hard to write a character arc around someone who already has their career going aside from her getting even better. Now, that all might have been fine and dandy, but it was their workaround for Utada not being able to have a real arc that really bothered me. Instead of following through on her current path to become a world-famous actress, Utada jumps ship early on and becomes an idol singer. That'd be bad enough on its own, but becoming an idol singer wasn't even her own choice. She had it forced on her by her manager, and then her friends pressured her into doing it when she showed every sign of not wanting to. It was pretty messed up. What message is that sending? It doesn't matter whether or not you're comfortable doing something. If everyone says you should do it, you better do it. That's not okay. And on top of being pressured into doing a job she might not want to do, of all the jobs, it's being an idol singer that Utada is forced into. I will be the first to admit, I do not understand the appeal of idols at all. The closest I've come to enjoying the concept was when I watched Symphogear, which was an incredibly dumb show, but it was fun and not much else. Also, I imagine not exactly an accurate representation of the whole idol thing. Conceptually, dolling up pretty girls and having them sing generic pop songs on stages in front of huge crowds sounds like an inherently cynical practice meant to appeal to some of the lowest common denominator desires to the detriment of the performer. The idol singer is not a respected figure, but a doll to be obsessed over, which just seems like a pitiable existence for anyone, an existence I would not wish on anyone to put up with, let alone teenage girls. All of these views of mine, by the way, come from being an outsider looking in on this crazy idol nonsense, and having seen the brilliant Satoshi Kon film Perfect Blue, which is an animated version of the idol thing I just described. It delves hard into the psychological and real-world impact the idol business can have on people, both the idols and the consumers the business targets. Once I'd seen that movie, I could never look at a cute idol the same way again. I cannot say for certain whether my very limited views and interpretations of the idol industry are at all accurate, but I can say that I'd rather stay far away, and to see an innocent young girl forced into something so potentially disgusting, I'd rather not. The other character that rubbed me the wrong way was the third animal friend, introduced almost halfway through the show. Milk. Yeah. Milk is a terrible character, not only because she's the most annoying piece of garbage I've ever had the misfortune of witnessing in any piece of fiction, but also because she never grows the fuck up. In a show where almost every other character grows in some fashion over the course of the show, Milk starts as an annoying fuckwit and ends as an annoying fuckwit. And I realize I sound maybe a tad uncharacteristically mad and dirty-mouthed at how much I hate this character, but she really fucking bothered me. She's introduced when she steals Nozomi's lunch, causing her to starve, and then Milk proceeds to act all high and mighty, like the lunch belonged to her all along, and screw Nozomi for thinking she should have her own food. Already, first impressions of her are that she's an arrogant, self-righteous ass, and then she proceeds to keep up that act and never learn from her mistakes. She will proceed, in following episodes, to steal Nozomi's food on numerous occasions and somehow manipulate the situation so that others get mad at Nozomi. She refuses to acknowledge the main cast as worthy of being Precure, even after they save her ass on numerous occasions. And, at the very end, she hands the all-important MacGuffin, the thing Precure has been protecting for nearly 50 episodes from the bad guys, straight into the hands of the bad guys because she is blind and stupid and easily manipulated. There are absolutely no redeeming qualities to her character, not the tiniest action or utterance from her mouth to make me care an ounce about her. I wish she would die. She wouldn't even be so bad if at some point she realized, hey, I'm kind of an arrogant ass. Maybe I should try not being that. But no, there is no change or development in this character. Instead, she spends the entire series entirely one note. And that one note is aggravating beyond belief. She is an active detriment to my enjoyment of the series every time she is on screen, and the series would have been so much better off without her. In conclusion, fuck Milk. Luckily, that's the bulk of the negative I have to say about this season. Let's move on to nicer things. Part 3, Nicer Things. The first thing that struck me upon booting up episode 1 was how different the background art was. In previous seasons, the background art was just sort of whatever. It all did its job, but I can't say it was memorable or noteworthy beyond that. With this season, though, I can still see that opening shot even weeks after having seen the first episode. The style of the background art in Yes 5 is much less realistic, with fewer details. I'm not quite sure how to describe it beyond it being more minimalist, but regardless, I find it much more visually appealing than the background art of the previous seasons. It helps to set a more fresh atmosphere for this season. It was already a big departure from previous seasons in its expanded main cast, and the background art, to me, reflects that and is a part of the departure. Put simply, it just looks cool. I also got a kick about how this season's major MacGuffin was handled. Precure is tasked by their cute animal friends, Coco and Nuts. Let those names just sink in. They're tasked with gathering a bunch of pinkies in order to power the Dream Colette, which will grant one wish and then be useless forever. Coco and Nuts need it to restore their kingdom, which was destroyed by the bad guys. Sounds nice and simple. Precure has a goal to work toward, and indeed the restoration of the kingdom is a powerful motivating force throughout the season. And at the end, oops, the big bad got the MacGuffin and used its single wish to become immortal. Ignoring that this twist was brought about by the incomprehensible idiocy of Milk, I thought this an unexpected yet appropriate turn of events. It sends the message that just because you work hard at something doesn't mean things will always go your way. Life is unfair and sometimes downright cruel, and you just have to deal with it. It's how the characters respond to this that make the message really resonate. Just because life hits you hard doesn't mean you have to give up. In the case of Coco and Nuts, they boldly declare that if they can't wish for the kingdom to be restored, then they'll rebuild it by hand. They don't give in to despair when life hits them as hard as it ever has. Instead, they rise up stronger than before, determined to carry on and forge their own path. And that's goddamn rad. The tossing aside of the MacGuffin wasn't just cool because it was funny, but also because the tossing aside of it facilitated character growth while simultaneously communicating a message of strong-willed determination, not giving in to despair, of forging onward despite the consequences, and emerging a better person. Frankly, I can't think of a better use for a MacGuffin than as a facilitator of pure awesome. That final confrontation is Yes 5's ultimate declaration of its theme: hope versus despair. Leading up to that finale, this season has had this theme play out in several smaller-scale stories. Komachi, for instance, despairs when she first hears from Nuts that she's a shit writer, and contemplates giving up. But she ultimately emerges from the experience hopeful that she can improve her writing and sets out to write harder and better. Karen starts out the series despairing that she'll be forever isolated, but is filled with hope when she finds friends she can rely on. The bad guys, this season hilariously represented by a soul-sucking corporation, feed off despair, but when confronted with Nozomi, who is filled with hope for the future, both hers and everyone else's, they cannot possibly stand. The theme works because it is repeated and built upon until the end, where it's taken to its logical extreme. And while I'm here, one more cool thing to talk about. Part 4, the movie. The Yes 5 movie is, no contest, the best Precure movie thus far. This movie shtick is a bunch of evil Precure clones that have to be fought one-on-one. Evil clones sound cliche, but this was the first time they had been a thing in Precure, so I was more than willing to let it slide. What made them work was how cool the fights against them were. None of the fights in this movie are quite as awesome as the one from the last movie, but that's made up for in their quantity. Not only are the fights in this movie much better animated and choreographed than the average episode fight, but there are so many of them! The fights take up a significant portion of the movie's runtime. Given both their good quality and great quantity, the fights alone make the movie well worth sitting through. The fights are also elevated by their somber tone, which is a nice contrast from any other fight in the series. Where any other fight in Yes 5 is about how filled with hope the main characters are, these fights are about the tragedy of the evil clones. Each Precure is faced with the worst version of themselves, and those versions are forced to fight when they might not want to. And there's no hope for these clones. They're doomed to die, and the only solace Precure can take from the experience is that they get to live on and remember what happened. That's just about as bleak as the series has ever gotten, and the movie has my respect for that. Granted, the build-up to the fights is a bit of a slog. Precure goes to a theme park where they all cosplay as princesses and act all lofty, and it's weird, but not entirely a waste of time. As during the escape to Princess Land, they do establish some plot points that seem minuscule at first, but ultimately end up mattering a lot, which makes the whole scene much more amusing in retrospect. And that's it, really. That's the movie, and that's the season. Conclusion. was good. Better than Splash Star. It's my favorite Precure season thus far. I wished at the end of the last video that the trend of the series getting better as it went along would hold, and it looks like that's happening, so I'm happy. Of all the Precure seasons, yes, 5 has the most well-rounded cast and it's the best looking of the bunch. Really, its only weaknesses are those it shares with the rest of the series. That thanks to its length it can drag at times and some episodes are boring and pointless, but those flaws are much less pronounced in the season. Frankly, I'm satisfied. Thanks for sitting through my rambling about a children's magical cartoon show. Leave a comment if anything I said sparked your interest. Believe it or not, I do get a kick out of those. Stick around if you enjoyed this, there's more Where It Came From on its way. The next Precure season is a direct sequel to this one, subtitled Go Go Power Rangers, so look forward to that. Thanks for watching, I'll see you later.